I think we get very wrapped up, and I don't know like your inbox, but I probably get Jesus, like I open up in the morning, it's like 20 newsletters I forgot to subscribe to. And it can be very overwhelming just reading everything that's happening with AI and feeling like you're being left behind. And I really think it's about focusing on the simple things. What, as a marketer, my job is to get someone to take action. We can make it complicated, but at the end of the day, that's my job. Get someone to open this, respond to this, register for this. I'm focused on that. How do I get someone to take an action? And then behind that is what would motivate them to take that action? Why would they do this? So am I putting out really good content that motivates them to want to learn more? Like, I think backing up, really looking at what your job is about, what you're trying to do versus how the tools that you're using to do it, I think will help people become a little bit more sane. And I think they'll feel a little bit more comfortable. And I feel like they'll be a little bit more focused on what's really important. And I think we're losing sight of that. We're getting wrapped around the axle of these technologies that are evolving every day, and it's very hard to stay current on them. And you don't know what works and what doesn't. I think spending some time really considering your return on effort is going to be really important, and where you put your resources and how much time you're going to certain things, and maybe paring back, you know, maybe taking some tools out, maybe going back and looking at things that really work.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the E-Marketing Association Power Marketing Podcasts. Here's Kevin.
Hi, I'm Kevin Lee with the E-Marketing Association. Also run an agency, Did It. It's got about 50 people, been doing digital marketing since before starting Did It. So about 32, 33 years of digital marketing. Super excited to be here with Scott Gillum, who just released a book called The Buyer Journey, which I think smashes a bunch of myths about exactly who the buyers are and the journeys that they're on. So let's start with the catalyst for deciding that there needed to be a book about this effect that you saw when analyzing people who actually go through in particular, the B2B buying journey.
Yeah. Thanks, Kevin. I appreciate being on here. Yeah, the hidden buyer journey came about through just starting to question. I was with an agency, big agency 10 years ago, and we started to look at the role of emotions in purchase decisions in B2B. And from there, that led to trying to go even deeper into that and understanding the motivations and behaviors, and that led us to looking at personality type as a influence. So we started to study the role of personality in business decision making, and it's an area that wasn't explored in B2B, as you know. We have a tendency to think everything is linear and rational, and even though we know it's not, we still treat it that way. Our tools are geared that way. The data that we collect is geared that way, and so this was an opportunity to provide some additional research into an area that isn't often thought of.
So, in the world of consumer marketing, personas are pretty commonly thought about, right? And often there are a half dozen or a dozen different personas that are evaluated as it relates to targeting, right? When you're talking about B2B and product market fit and account-based marketing, were there just a couple of personas that were, uniquely isolated as it relates to their buyer journey, or were there more than two?
Yeah, it's interesting. So we started this process by helping a client who just received from the product marketing organization 17 different personas that they were supposed to activate, right? And as you know, in B2B, a lot of times those personas are actually just selling scenarios. And that's what they were. They were selling scenarios, and the go-to-market team was like, how do I activate this? And so that's when we started to look at, well, let us know, let's look at your buyer, and then let's understand your buyer from a personality standpoint, and maybe we can find some commonality. And we did. Um, Data science and life science was one of the areas that we were focused on. Data scientists and life science companies have a tendency, two-thirds of the time, they have the same personality type. We're using disc segmentation, 66, 60 98% of the time, data scientists' profile is a steady. And so once you understand that personality type, you can get to their preferences in terms of the outreach, communication, the assets that you use, the messaging that you use can be very, very specific to a majority of your audience if you know who they are.
And so is that consistent across the B2B uh, industry categories? I would imagine SaaS software is quite different than selling garbage carting services to building managers, right? Or
Yeah,
is it simpler than that? I mean, is it possible to boil down the essence into
it,
simpler buckets?
yeah. So we've looked at 15 different industries, to your point. Um, and here's the interesting thing: birds of a feather flock together. People with similar, and here's ultimately what we've learned. Your personality type can lead you to a profession, to a company, and to an industry that you
Mhm.
work in. And the further you go with your education or degrees or certifications, the more likely you are to follow your personality path.
Mm.
And so, chief information security officers have a very distinct personality. They're the C in DISC. They are conscientious, which they are skeptic. They're analytical, data driven. You would expect a person who's the chief information security officer to have all those attributes. You want that type of person, right? And so
Yeah.
that's what we find is in industries and in these functional areas, you get people who have these attributes in these roles, and and it becomes very logical. Like, yes, that makes perfect sense that a person with this type of personality would be in that type of job.
So that sounds like that would be pretty informative from the perspective of crafting messages in an ABM construct as it relates to roles that, I mean, the single decision maker is obviously how everyone would like to think about B2B, but the reality is there's often a committee,
Yeah,
and it may include a chief information security officer, and it may include other folks as well, right? And you
yeah,
want to get the right messages and hit the right emotional buttons for these different people who may either have the ability to be a tailwind or a headwind, right? And so, how have you ended up advising folks over the years, and then how did that manifest in the book, right? As it
yeah,
relates to understanding the broader context.
yeah. It's a really good point. We have been able to look at deals from beginning to end. Our clients have shared with us journeys that are 15 months long, and we are able to collect all the information on who the buyers are, what they've consumed, what information are they looking at, what are the conversations they're having with sales, and we see how personalities influence other personalities. So, a book was written about 10 years ago called The Challenger Customer. And in that, they did research with sales reps on what makes good buyers. And they called that the mobilizers. And they gave the attributes of the mobilizers. And in that, they described the roles that people play in the buying group. We took the attributes of the mobilizers and matched it with the attributes of personalities. And there is a clear match on that. And so you are now able to understand because the tools that are available, these AI personality profiling tools, you can take a name, take a person's name, drop it into the tool, wait about 5 seconds and get a personality profile. And then you can understand what role they'll play in a buying group because you can match it up with the other research. So it's fascinating. And then we see it in the data. So then we see, okay, an influencer who's likely at the very beginning of a buyer journey consuming information because that's their behavior, then give it to a person that moves it through the organization, 6, 8 months, get it through the organization. And then you can see people coming at the end of the deal to be involved, kick the tires, check out the vendor, validate it, right? You can see those personalities playing out through the buyer's journey.
So to your earlier point, like a lot of this is invisible, right, to the
Yeah.
tools and platforms that industries have come to know and love, but perhaps, don't really do the job as it relates to understanding the true impact of their marketing and the true impact of sort of early touch points that sales teams may be having. So, how should CROs and CMOs together sort of team up to understand how to, you know, shine a flashlight on this sort of invisible behavior and
Yeah.
then figure out how to change it and to take full advantage of the mobilizers and all the other influencers that might play a role in the final decision.
Yeah. It's funny in the book I show like almost every 10 years we recognize there's a human behind the title and the role, right? It's like, oh my God, look, there's a role like emotions and purchase decisions, even in B2B, like it's this big wait, oh, look. And I'm kind of doing that, but I'm like saying, look, this is happening. In fact, I conclude in the last chapter research from the 1940s when it was called industrial marketing, and there was tractor sales that Harvard studied, and it actually like the role of emotions in a tractor sale. Anyway,
Yeah.
we know it's there. What we haven't had is the tools to be able to get these soft factors, and now we have the tools. We have the tools to be able to understand the personality type of the title and role that we're talking to. And at the end of the day, people make decisions. My titles and roles, people make the decisions. And now we have a better way to understand that person in that title and role than we've ever had. And then we've got the tools to activate on that. So you can train and build custom GPTs to write in personality type. So you can take your one email and cut it into four personalities and write in their preferred language. You can even go down to visuals. You can create the right kind of assets. We can understand the preferences of those personalities and we become much more targeted, much more connected, much more relevant to audiences. And it is marketing and sales working together. Marketing has the tools, sales has the tools. You connect the two tools together and you really get a 360 of what's happening, both from a rational and emotional side.
So a lot of times, when information like this is sort of passed up into the CFO, right, where um, even with AI, enabling this, right, to some extent, it seems like there's a lot more customization. It's mass customization, but it's still customization, right?
Yeah.
And so a skeptic might say, well, can't we just simplify this? And can't we just, remove these extra steps? So, what's been helpful in sort of giving the tools to the internal teams so that the sort of mass customization argument can be made, right, to sort of change the status quo? Because inertia is huge at a lot of these companies, right? Changing the
Yes.
inertia requires a combination of epiphanies right,
Yeah.
within multiple departments in some cases, right? And
Yeah.
so, what's been helpful in sort of unlocking and creating those almost simultaneous epiphanies?
The rule of two-thirds was really a game changer. Exactly to your point, when we started this, we started at like small individual level, and we're like, wow, look at all the things that we're learning, and look how it's improving performance on, all the key metrics that we're looking at, right? Click-throughs, open rates, response rates, et cetera. And then we started to see it in sales. So we went to AT&T, we went to Microsoft, and they're like, how do we scale all this? And that took us a long time to get to the point of understanding that at the industry level, even at the industry level, we can tell you that you can do mass personalization at scale because of this birds of the feather phenomenon. People, certain roles, certain industries flock together, and you can get majority of your audience and deeply know them and have very high customized outreach at scale because of that role. And that was like the game changer of saying, yeah, you can do deep personalization at scale.
So there are sometimes fairly large organizations that a bunch of people's roles and responsibilities are the old way of doing that, right? So it seems like it might be a little bit of an organizational shock to realize that the 80-20, 90-10, or the power curve, when applied to these personas, means you might need less people actually to do this,
Yeah.
right? And sometimes the powers that be rely on, headcount is a almost like um, a bragging rights situation, right, within the organization. And so, have you had situations where you end up facing headwinds like that?
Yeah, we have. I think I do think we're at a point where there is a recognition that there aren't really any tools left that can give us scale and effectiveness. Even AI. AI is an efficiency play, right? And so if we need to go from volume to conversion, maybe we don't need as much. And that's where really, if you look at the yield curves, it's around conversion. It's not at volume and scale. And
Yeah.
I think there's the time for these honest conversations where I don't need 1,000 leads. I need 100 really highly qualified leads that are going to convert. And if that's the case with marketing, then on the sales side is I don't need 20 BDRs or SDRs. I need five really effective ones that are going to convert those really highly qualified leads. And I think we're getting to a day where those conversations are coming.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I don't know if it's as a result of people coming to this conclusion independently or at least partially to this conclusion. But there's certainly been a post-pandemic explosion of in-person investment, right? And that
Yeah.
includes
Yeah.
large trade shows and conferences, but it also, even more so, I think, includes an explosion of the curated lunches, curated dinners, curated masterminds, and roundtables. We've certainly seen that under the e-marketing association. We're getting asked like to put these things together, and I was resistant initially, but the reality is that there is that trust building that occurs. And if there are going to be birds of a feather at a dinner, right, similar personality types, and
Yeah.
they're all within the ICP of the company, it almost doesn't have to be purely talking about that company and the solution that it provides, but it can sort of, the brand can come along for the ride in many cases, right, and not be as overt as they might have been previously. So I'd love to get your thoughts on, does that change the marketing mix, right, dramatically, and the sales mix as well at the same time?
Yeah, I think that's where we're headed in that there's four selling scenarios that we're in, the reality of today. Human has been around forever, right?
Yeah,
Human to machine, machine to human, and machine to machine. And the machines are pushing on the ends. They're pushing on the very beginning part of the buyer's journey, and they're pushing in on the back end. And so it leaves this middle section where this human to human connection is most valued. And I think elevating that experience is where people, I don't even think intentionally know that's where it's headed, is
yeah.
how do we get more of that human to human interaction that has been missing? And the machines are can take care of these things that are low value that we wouldn't want to do anyway.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that does make a perfect segue into sort of agents, right? And the extent to which there's some stuff that humans that didn't necessarily need to be doing even then,
Yeah.
and perhaps weren't doing a particularly good job at when they did do it, or was boring to do, etc. And sort of the level to which that can be done agentically. Is there a downside to that from the perspective of, if it's poorly executed, does that actually create a negative brand experience?
Yeah, sure does. I don't know if you've ever seen any of the AI agents that have avatars in their own websites. We had a client that dropped one. The CMO didn't know it was happening, and it wasn't even pronouncing the name of the company correctly. You might want to take that down. Uh, yeah, just as much as trust is key to that ability to convert, so is the customer experience. And if you're able to create a customer experience with the machine as well as a human, then then that's going to happen. But right now, the machines have not been able to live up to that human experience. But we have a lot of bad human experience that exists right now.
So to that end, do you think companies are sort of under investing in the training and HR at the company level, right? And not uh, sort of satisficing at good enough way too early for some of these roles?
Yeah. In fact, I looked at that and I put that data in the book. 5 times as much investment is going into sales technology. Now, we've always known this from a marketing perspective, right? Scott Brinker and the Martech stack and everything. We've seen that grow every year. Now on the sales side, there's 5 times as much investment going into sales technology as going into sales training.
Mm.
Whatever is being spent on sales training is sales training on those tools that we're investing in. So the question is, are we investing in our human sellers to make them better at selling to humans? Are we making them better at understanding how to read buyers, understanding what buyers' challenges are? Or are we just training on how to use sales tools?
Yeah, that's fascinating. As it relates to sort of trust building and humans buying from humans, as well as brand trust, right?
Yeah,
Uh, how do those things sort of exist in parallel? Because obviously, a particular salesperson or a particular SDR or BDR or senior level salesperson or even a sales engineer, right? They're developing trust on an individual basis as they're having conversations with folks, prospects, and then there's sort of brand level trust. Like, okay, if a person calls from an IBM or an Oracle,
yeah,
or a Salesforce.com, there's a halo effect, a trust halo effect that comes with that, right? And sort of the relative importance of those, because obviously you don't always get to have the same person holding your hand through the buyer journey all the way through, right? You're getting passed off within the
yeah.
organization. The baton is being passed. So, any thoughts on that as it relates to the construct that's within the book?
Yeah. So we had research on purchase drivers. So why do they make decisions? What do they make decisions on? And then we also asked about the sales factors, the vendor that you were buying from. And when you look at purchase drivers, they're very um, rational. Product, usability, value. Those are the top three, right? Is it a great product? And this is where your reputation comes in as well. The things that you just mentioned, right? Company has a good reputation for building really good products. Apple's a great example, right? Um, but when you make decisions on those purchase drivers, that's only realized after the decision. So there's something else in play. What happened? What gets conveyed at that point of decision? And that's where we looked at the role of the brand, the seller, the value that buyers saw through engaging with that sales organization. Trust is number one, as you expect, is your ability to be able to build trust in a way that they trust what you say about the product, your ability to deliver on that, your ability to actually produce the results that they're looking for in terms of what meeting the need, right? Credibility, which goes along with trust and is a factor of brand as well. Like, do I believe that they're credible? Do they have third party validation, right? Are analysts talking and rating them, et cetera? And lastly, is this idea, the concept, because we couldn't really name it, we just called it hope. This hope, right? That the trust and credibility that's been built is true, right? And I hope that I have a good experience with this company, and I hope that the implementation goes well, right? And those are the soft factors that we never really consider, but that's actually at the point of the big decision is it's really built on those things because the product feature functionality is coming later. They're not going to get that at the deal.
So that seems like it would have a lot of implications as to where the company is in its brand building journey, right? And building trust.
Yeah.
Because there's a bunch of startups, I guess the AI startups that we're all seeing from the gigantic, $1 trillion market caps all the way down to the ones who just raised 5, 10, 15, $20 million, right? They're all facing a trust gap, right? Because
Yes.
they don't have the longevity, right, to be able to build the trust. And when it comes to buyers that are shelling out dollars, but also just buyers who are changing inertia, right? They have to trust in the fact that through this SaaS apocalypse that we're all living through, right? Those platforms that they're moving to and choosing not to build on their own, right, will continue
Yeah.
to be there, right?
Yeah.
Either under the same corporate ownership or as part of M&A under some new corporate ownership in the next 3 or 5 years. So, what are the implications of that for the startup community that are different than the enterprise community.
Yeah, it's how quickly can you build credibility in the industry and build that ability to be able to use that credibility to build trust. Um, it's a big question right now because you do, like you said, the big players out there are integrating more and more AI capability in their existing platforms, and they're going very fast. And so, as a vendor, to be able to, to gain some traction inside organizations, um, that's difficult. You better be able to deliver on what you say you can deliver on, and get people to want to talk about you. So that's it's word of mouth. It's net promoter, going back to like net promoter days when you get your clients excited enough that they want to talk about
Yeah, I mean that has implications from an SEO and now GEO perspective as well. And
it. Yeah.
obviously, folks are, during that buyer journey, uh, particularly sophisticates, right, will not only rely on touch points that can be seen with enough of a flashlight or microscope on them, but then touch points which are increasingly difficult to see, which are AI conversations,
Yeah.
which are multi-threaded, right? And they're not just a single query. So even trying to use, tracking platforms to try to understand, are we showing up and what's being said about us by the AIs are going to lose value as you start to think about people making, you know, 10 or 15 long uh, deep dives, right, with an AI to learn more
Yeah.
about a platform.
Yeah.
So that has, I think, implications to the marketing teams as well. Of as you're building credibility and trust, are you thinking about where is that? Where are those positive signals and positive content being created and syndicated and discussed?
Yeah. It's a really important point because AEO, as you know, it runs off of authority. And are you the source? Are you the best source? And are you your original source? And if you are in a marketing organization that is just using generative AI and you are remixing content, right, that's already existent, you're not going to show up. And so I think there's a lot of pressure on marketing organizations from top down, from the senior executives on boards to integrate AI to be more efficient without realizing the impact it's going to have on effectiveness.
Yeah, and humanity once again bubbles to the surface, right? When it comes to the types of content that the LLMs seem to prefer, right, is unique, new, high value, human generated content, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And it's going to be really interesting to see how the better marketing departments and go to market teams that include RevOps and CROs, right, will think about, well, how do I squeeze as much juice out of this trade show or event,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Where I'm getting customer testimonials and I'm talking to other industry experts and there's an interview with Scott Brinker about it or whatever, and then that gets posted, right? All this stuff is creating content that has dual purpose, right? It has the purpose of a tool that the sales team can use, a tool that content that the sales team can use, the marketing team can use it, and then there's the sort of AEO or GEO implications as well, and SEO implications. So I think it's more challenging than ever for the marketing teams to really think that through and prioritize.
yeah. I agree. And trying to be relevant to the audience that they're speaking to and breaking through the noise. The good news is it's easier than ever to create content. The bad news, it's easier than ever to create content, right?
Yeah,
So, like yourself, I've been in this area in marketing and B2B for a long time, and I remember how hard it was to create thought leadership. That was hard. That was a heavy lift. And to do it right now, it's still a heavy lift. And I don't think people realize that it is a heavy lift. They think it's easy using, generative tools. I can whip something up overnight and whip up a blog post, but making sure that that content is good, it's readable, it's valued, it has something to say, still matters. It doesn't matter that you're feeding an engine that has to run, it has to always be on, and you got to, pump out things. It's are you putting things out there that has value to the reader?
for sure. final question. What else should be marketers and go-to-market teams and CROs be thinking about this year as they, you know, figure out how to do things in the right order, right? Get their punch list in the right order and get their messaging out.
I think it's about simplifying. I think we get very wrapped up, and I don't know about your inbox, but I probably get, Jesus, like I open up in the morning, it's like 20 newsletters I forgot to subscribe to. And it can be very overwhelming just reading everything that's happening with AI and feeling like you're being left behind. And I really think it's about focusing on the simple things. What, as a marketer, my job is to get someone to take action. We can make it complicated, but at the end of the day, that's my job. Get someone to open this, respond to this, register for this. I'm focused on that. How do I get someone to take an action? And then behind that is what would motivate them to take that action? Why would they do this? So am I putting out really good content that motivates them to want to learn more? Like, I think backing up, really looking at what your job is about, what you're trying to do versus how the tools that you're using to do it, I think will help people become a little bit more sane. And I think they'll feel a little bit more comfortable. And I feel like they'll be a little bit more focused on what's really important. And I think we're losing sight of that. We're getting wrapped around the axle of these technologies that are evolving every day, and it's very hard to stay current on them. And you don't know what works and what doesn't. I think spending some time really considering your return on effort is going to be really important, and where you put your resources and how much time you're doing certain things, and maybe paring back, maybe taking some tools out, maybe going back and looking at things that really work.
Yeah, that's great advice for business in general, right? Is focus on the stuff that really moves the needle. Keep it as simple as possible, right? So that it's digestible. You can't boil the ocean. So
Yeah,
that's a great final thought. Thanks so much, Scott, for joining me and sharing your wisdom with the viewers and the listeners.
great. Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate the conversation.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in the Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.